Hello, and welcome to our very first talk with the Gouldian Finch Breeders Group. I am Nancy Finchley. I am an aviculturist and a Gouldian finch lover. I am not an expert in Gouldians. I'm just a hobby breeder, and I'm not a veterinarian. So I would always encourage you to go and ask questions of your veterinarian if you have a problem or concern with your finches. I have enabled the answer feature, and I'm not seeing it here, so I'm not sure what's going on. It says this feature is disabled. What does that mean? I think you should be able to click the Q&A and ask a question. Try it and see. So I hope you don't mind. I'm going to use some notes today because we're going to get into a lot of pretty deep stuff. This will be recorded for later. I encourage you to grab a pencil and paper and just make a lot of notes. We're going to talk about hygiene in your aviary or your cages, and we're going to talk about droppings, because a lot of you feel that the droppings can really show what illnesses are available. I will tell you they can, but they're not necessarily a diagnostic tool. We're also going to talk about illnesses extensively, and we'll talk about medications. So since you are the Gouldian Finch Breeders Group, I'm going to assume you have at least a basic knowledge of care. I will be making a video later on that's on basic care, but I'm going to assume that you guys don't need it today. And we only have an hour, so I'm going to move pretty quickly. I am writing a book on the Gouldian Finch. It's called the Lady Gouldian Finch Handbook. It's going to be available as an ebook, and I had hoped to have it completed by the end of this month, but that's not going to happen. So it probably will be available December of 2014. So if you would like to get a copy, or I'm sorry, if you'd like to be notified when the ebook is available, the Lady Gouldian Finch Handbook, please email me at nancyfinchley@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to let you know when the book comes out. Okay. Again, there's a Q&A, a question and answer feature here that you should be able to use. I've enabled it. I'm not seeing it, so I'm not sure whether it's working. I do use Google Hangouts. I'm just a little confused right now. Okay, so the best care for your finches is going to be prevention. If you think about it, every illness is bacterial or viral or fungal, or it's a parasite, or it's a protozoa. So the easiest way to not have those is to keep them out in the first place, and you do that through your hygiene practices. So how do you clean your cages? How do you clean the grates and the tray beneath? What method do you use to remove the litter or the papers beneath? How do you clean your perches, your food trays, and your waters? All of these are going to come into play when you are trying to prevent illness or disease. A good daily habit and a good weekly habit are the things that are going to prevent the majority of these diseases that we see in our birds. I wanted to give you an example because a lot of times people say, well, you know, we don't really have that bacteria in our aviary, but we almost all do. So let's talk about a mold spore, because that's something we can all, you know, we've all been exposed to. So you have a mold spore. Let's say that your bird creates a dropping and it falls down onto the newspaper below the grate. It's out of his reach. It's not going to harm him. And then you give him a little bath and he splashes some water onto that dropping. So now the dropping remains wet. And maybe later in the day, some more droppings occur right there in the same spot, or He splashes some water there again, and now we're looking at hours of dampness on that dropping. Well, a mold spore only takes about 24 hours to start setting up. So if you have left that wet dropping for 24 hours, then it's already had the chance for the mold to grow, not to mention the bacteria or whatever else. So as you see, these common things can happen so easily, and that's why we've got to be scrupulous with our care in our cages. There is a difference in cleaning and disinfecting. When I clean, I use something like Dawn dishwashing liquid. I just mix that with water and scrub everything down. I use hot water, but I might have it all shiny clean. I have not disinfected to prevent the germs. In order to prevent germs, we've got to do something like bleach. Now, household bleach is fine. The regular cheap kind that you get at the drugstore is what works. It's 5 or 6% solution. You can take about a tablespoon and mix it into a gallon of water, and you have plenty of bleach to sanitize your entire cage area. Do not use industrial strength bleach. This is too strong. Just use your regular household bleach. And never mix your bleach with ammonia or any acid like vinegar, because you can create a toxic gas. I do vinegar. This is just apple cider vinegar, and I'm not real technical on my measurement. I put this much in, and I fill the rest with water, and I spray down the parts of my cage that might have poop on them that are not removable. And then I go in and scrub those and wash them. I go ahead and wash with the Dawn in the water, and then I go back afterwards and use the bleach. So that's just my system of doing it. Your scrub brushes, your sponges, I have a toothbrush that I use. Whatever your tools are that you use for cleaning need to be cage specific. By that I mean you have one set for cage A and another set for cage B. If you don't, you run the risk of transferring whatever bacteria or fungus or whatever you've got going on over to the next cage. Now, this often does not matter to us until we suddenly have an illness and we've lost 9 birds in one aviary, and oh gee, we cleaned today with the same brush, so we've transferred it over to the next one. Let's not do that. So just I have a big scrub brush and a toothbrush, and occasionally I'll use a claw and paper towels. That's about all I use for tools in my cage. I am wondering what cleaners you are using in your cage. Do you use KD cleaner? I have some here. KD is, you can put it in the water and let them drink it because it cleans their bowels and so forth, but it also is a really good cleaner for your cage. You just mix a little bit into your water. There's instructions on the bottle. You could also use vinegar. You can use grapeseed extract. You can just use the Dawn dishwashing liquid. What you should not use are any cleaners that have a phenol derivative like Lysol, because those are toxic to our birds. We already talked about the chlorine gas. And ammonia is toxic. Let's not use ammonia products around our birds, even though it's inexpensive. For soaking the dishes, I put 1 tablespoon of bleach to a gallon of water. You have to soak them at least 10 minutes to sanitize them. Rinse like crazy. Here's where people make their mistake with the bleach. They say, oh, well, bleach killed all my birds. It's not the bleach. It's the fact that you didn't rinse it. So rinse it like crazy and let it air dry. If you have 2 sets of dishes, you can easily go ahead and have 1 set in there and 1 set outside air drying. The same thing goes for your perches. Most of us use wood perches. And if you're in a place where you can just go cut another branch and replace it, do that very often. But if you're like the rest of us and you have to purchase your perches, then go ahead, scrub them down with the cleaner, soak them in the bleach, and then put them outside or even put them in the oven and dry them on a low temperature. Make sure they're completely dry before you put them back in, because wood holds moisture. Those perches can hold so many germs because they hold moisture easily, and so does carpet. I know that some people have been using the AstroTurf or other carpets. I met a gentleman who he thought it was great. He got a carpet scrap and he would cut a piece of the carpet and lay it in the bottom of his cage, and when it became soiled, he would toss it out and put in another. That is totally holding the moisture in. It is setting up a breeding ground for bacteria, and you just have no idea what that could do to your bird's lungs, and also what germs you're passing around to them. I totally would not put carpet in my cage if I were you. Cages. The cages themselves can hold toxins. Besides rust, zinc, any anodized surface is going to be toxic. Just think metals like zippers and pennies are toxic. So that means our quick links, our chains, our eyelets, galvanized zinc. Here is a toy. Now, obviously, this is not a Finch toy, but just look at it. It's this is a toy that I might have near my Finch. I don't know. And so here's the link. Here's the chain. Here's the eyelet, and the bell. All of these things could have toxins in them. So you've got to be really careful. Now, a lot of times when they have the toxins from the metals, like lead, for example, you're going to see a decreased immunity. So your bird may become ill over and over, and it has this and it has that, and you're thinking, well, he's not well, but what's going on? And the answer could be a toxicity from a lead or even the rust in your cage. Also, you've probably, if you're watching this, you've already decided where to put your birds. But I do want to point out that whether you keep them indoors or outdoors, you have environmental concerns that can affect their health. For example, if they're indoors, you have Teflon, which includes, ladies, your curling iron. You have candles. The plug-in scents are toxic. New construction is toxic. The gassing off from the new woods or new carpet, the odor from that is toxic to birds. So you have all these concerns indoors, but then if you go outdoors, you have soil, which can harbor many parasites and protozoa. You have moisture to contend with. They could perhaps overheat. You have predators. So all of these things come into play, and no matter which place we're keeping them, we've just got to be good guardians and make sure that we're doing the best that we can. I would suggest you use an air purifier in all the rooms where you keep your birds. Also, if you ever visit a bird mart, a bird rescue, any place where there are a lot of birds that are not yours, when you come home, and I learned this the hard way, when you come home, change all of your clothes and change your shoes and wash your hands before you visit your own birds. This is a really good way to pick up something toxic that can just run through your entire aviary. And I think it may be the shoes, actually, that were the big clue for me. So now we're going to talk about illness. Our birds are prey animals, not predators, but they are the prey of the predators. And so they are not going to tell us when they're ill. They're going to keep it a secret. So how do you know? How do you know when your birds are sick? I'm looking for that place where you type in again. I really need to hear you. I had counted on having comments from the audience. The Q&A. Nope, it's just not going to work. Okay, anyway, how would you tell if your bird was sick? One way, of course, is they're puffed up or they have a wet vent. But a less obvious thing is if they're just having less activity or they're not eating, or you just feel like they're not right because you know your bird. And this is where it's important. You know, that watching that we do that we all feel guilty about, it's really important for us to watch our birds and know their habits so that we can see the difference. Step one, as soon as you feel that a bird is just not right, get it out of there. Get it into quarantine, please. And in fact, I want to give you one assignment, and that is, if you don't have a hospital cage, I want you to make one today. And I'm going to tell you how. You get a 10-gallon aquarium. You can get them at Walmart if you're in the U.S. And you can get them with the screen over the top. That's what you want, the 10-gallon tank and the screen. You also want a thermometer and a heating pad. You will take this tank, line it with paper towels, take a small towel, like a hand towel, and cover most of the tank with that towel. And you're going to put your heater, your heating pad, below it. The glass will contain the majority of the heat, and you will heat the tank to 86 degrees. This is now your hospital cage, and it's where you immediately place any bird that you want to quarantine. I do not quarantine mine together. If there's illness going on, I separate them in case there's more than one thing going on. And I don't use the glass tank. I have plenty of glass aquariums around here, but I'll show you my hospital cage. I just have this thing that I feel clean air is better. So here is my cage, and here's my little guy in the cage. Can you see him? He's on the bottom. There he is. That is Eric. He is a chestnut flanked white Umo. And Eric, I don't know what got into the cage. My cage is outdoors, but it's contained by a screen and it's sheltered by a wall on 3 sides. And Eric is the only one who can't really fly because he's a Umo and they stay on the bottom. So he had his band pulled down over his toes, and there was blood there, and there was blood up on his thigh. And I don't know what got him. That was yesterday, so he went straight in the hospital cage, and I cleaned him off, and he seems pretty happy and healthy today. So, and no more mishaps. So we don't know what happened. Anyway, so make your hospital cage, heat it to 86 degrees. Now we're going to talk about poopology, which I really don't like to call it that because that makes me a poopologist, but that seems to be the word we use for Poop 101. Droppings are changed by the environment, by stress, and by diet, as well as illness. And that is why some people say we don't use the poop specifically for diagnosing illness. Let's say that it's an indicator, okay? It is an indicator that something's going on. So I have some examples here. I know this is disgusting, but here it is. Let's see if I can show you. All right, yeah, down here near the bottom, what do you see going on down here? These, they look very watery, don't they? And the feces, the long part that should be twisted into a spiral, is straight. Now, those poops were from yesterday, and they were Eric's, the little guy in the cage. That is not illness. Eric was stressed. He had been attacked by whatever it was. I don't know if he got hung or what happened, but that was simply a stress. That was not an illness. And it's important to remember that everything is not illness. If you've just fed lettuce, it's going to be more watery. So use your common sense. But wet poop over time is a sign of illness, as is smelly poop. Usually smelly means bacteria, and I want to tell you also, smelly means you can probably catch it, because bacterial, a lot of the times, is something we can catch. Droppings can also be off just because they're molting. You can see a little diarrhea, but they're molting, so you know it's probably okay. Just watch them. That's just a clue to watch. And also, droppings change when birds are sitting on a nest because they're holding it in. So I didn't manage to get any of those on my paper, but when the hen comes out of the nest, her poop is very large. And it can be smelly, but that's because she's been on the nest, nothing to worry about. So use them as an indicator, but not for a diagnosis. I'm just going to go over things that you can see in the droppings, and you probably just want to jot them down, and then we're going to talk about illness and medications after that. So just real quickly, droppings have 3 parts. All 3 parts can be an indicator of an illness. The urates is what we're going to talk about first. Urates are the white part, normally. If they're suddenly dry, you're probably looking at dehydration in your bird. If they're dark green or yellow, you might be seeing liver disease. And listen, here's what happens. The bacterial diseases come in, and they move quickly in the bird's body, and they start to cause liver damage. So 3 days into it, you're seeing this green poop or the yellow poop, because you're having an extension of the bacterial disease all the way to the liver. If the urates are brown, that could be lead poisoning. If they are red, excuse me, I do have a voice today. I didn't have one yesterday. If the urates are red, you're seeing blood, probably low in the intestine, or kidney disease. If they're black, they have stopped eating. If your bird has black urates, you're probably at the end of his lifespan there. Oh, also, I'm sorry, the red, if you're seeing the red urates, think about whether he could have eaten like a sharp piece of eggshell or a sharp piece of cuttle bone. I have a, what is that thing? It's a NutriBullet, and I put my eggshells in there and spin them, and it doesn't take very long, and it turns them almost to a powder, and they'll still eat them, but there are no sharp edges. So think about preventing that way. The urine, the clear watery part of your poop. Again, green or yellow, liver disease. Red is internal bleeding, or could be lead poisoning. If there isn't any urine, this is cute, kind of, because people bring this up a lot when they've bought a new bird. Oh gosh, it's got no urine, it's got this dry, pasty poop. That simply means they've been on an all-seed diet. Just fix their diet. Give them some greens, give them some fresh vegetables or some sprouts. They love sprouts. If the urine is increased, they could be drinking a lot. They could be eating foods high in water. Eliminate those before you decide there's disease. If it is disease, a lot of times it's bacterial in nature. Now, the feces, the solid tubular part. If it's black, you could be looking at bleeding higher up in the intestinal tract. If it's pea green, it could be liver damage. And if it's that almost tan, peachy color, you could be looking at pancreas problems or digestive problems. Poops often will increase in size and change color at the same time. So that has meaning that's different from what we just discussed. So let's talk about that. Yellow with a lot of white and enlarged. You're looking at probably Campylobacter, which is a gram-negative bacteria, or Cryptosporidium, not the one humans catch, but a birdie one. There's no treatment for that one. Now, the Campylobacter you can treat with antibiotics. The Cryptosporidium, not so much. Clean their water for sure. Make sure it's not in the water, and just do good hygiene. If it's in their lungs, they're going to be coughing, but there's not a lot you can do for it other than you can try anticoccidial drugs. I don't see that they're very effective. If an enlarged poop is green, and it's not from green foods, it could be a fungal infection. You'd treat with a fungicide. It could be ornithosis, which if you have the bigger birds, we call it psittacosis. I don't know why we call it ornithosis in the little guys, but it's parrot fever. It's infectious, and it's infectious to humans, yes. So use your doxycycline for that one. If you see an enlarged poop and it's white, a lot of times that's a yeast infection or a coccidian. It could possibly be a gizzard issue, but that is normally not the case. If you see lumpy or undigested food, it could just be incomplete digestion. It could be from Giardia, which is a parasite. It could be a hypermodal intestine. You know, humans get that. You have like intestine spasms. So it's just a nervous stomach in a bird. If you see foam in the enlarged poop, a lot of times that's Clostridium, which is a bacterial intestinal disease, and it's treatable with antibiotics. If they have diarrhea, you will see soft feces with no tubular shape. Now remember, that's just the feces where the diarrhea is. A lot of times people will see the polyuria, the bigger urine, more urine, and they'll say, oh, they have diarrhea. No, it's the spiral shape is watery and doesn't have a shape, and probably a wet vent. You are probably looking at a bacteria. Treat with an antibiotic cocktail. Limit the watery foods. Unless you start to see dehydration. If you see that, encourage the drinking. Maybe give them a bath or some fruit or foods that you know they like. Do not ever force feed a bird with dehydration. I know a lot of people want to put a bit of water or a bit of Pedialyte into their mouth with a dropper. I might do one drop if they're really, really weak and I feel like I'm not seeing a lot of other symptoms. I generally won't do that because there's such a big chance of aspirating the liquid. I just wanted to show you, this is when I talk about an antibiotic cocktail. I'm sorry, it's spilled all out in the bag. This is MedPet's 4-in-1 powder, and it's what I use most of the time. It is, let's see if it says all the ingredients here. Yeah, purolitazone, ronidazole, and some other things. It says for the treatment of canker, E. coli, paratyphoid, and coccidiosis. So those are some of the bigger bacterial infections that our birds have. Now, let's talk about common illnesses, and the first group is going to be our bacterial illnesses. E. coli, strep, staph, ornithosis, salmonella. Did these all sound familiar? Yes, they do, because they're all things that you and I can catch. So, wear your gloves. I have a box of gloves outside by the aviary and a box of gloves indoors with which to clean everything. E. coli. Now, I want to tell you about an incident I had recently. I had a hen, and what do we always say about the hens? We say they're egg-bound. I had this hen. She wasn't acting right. She got weaker and weaker and lethargic. And finally, about 4 days into it, she was puffed up. And the 5th day, she was puffed up. And I moved her to another cage. I treated her as if she were egg-bound. And she died. At that same time, I had another nest. And 2 babies died. Well, they do sometimes. And then I had I had 1 baby from that batch that fledged and died a week later. And when I removed the nest, because he was the last one to fledge, there was no sign of those 2 that had disappeared, that had died. And the nest was particularly smelly. Not just smell from being out in the heat, but smell like illness, just really gross smell, a death smell. And so that was probably E. coli, and that's probably what got all 4 of those birds, including the hen. So I know that we tend to just say, oh, they're egg-bound, but you've got to look for these bacterial diseases. And E. coli is very common. It's a germ that's actually probably in your mouth right now. It is all found in the bird's intestine. And so what happens is they poop, and it lays there, and maybe some food gets up against it, and for some reason, they pick it up with their beak, and then they ingest it, and then they get E. coli. You treat it with a sulfa antibiotic, and you also have got to clean everything. With all of these bacterial diseases, I'm cleaning. I remove food, water, everything I possibly can. If I had another set of cages, I would completely move them to another cage. That's about the only way to get rid of it. Citrobacter and strep and staph, these are all sort of related and similar. You're probably not going to know the difference between strep and staph in your bird unless you have a veterinarian analyze the dropping. They can indicate a bird with a compromised immune system. They can also be an indicator of a damp environment, wet food, old water. The symptoms are the droppings are going to change to green or become watery, dull feathers, weight loss, panting. You will see fluffing and some depression, some slowed behavior. These are potentially deadly, and they're pretty fast. You can treat them with amoxicillin or tetracycline, but if you're dosing it in water, you have to think, are they drinking it? Quarantine the bird, clean the cage thoroughly, get rid of all the food and water. Ornithosis or psittacosis or parrot fever. Now remember, I told you this is one that we can catch. Green or watery droppings, fluffed birds, sneezing. They might be scratching their face. They may have an eye infection, and you may think they're scratching because of the eye. I don't know if that's the case or not. And they may seem sleepy. Or they may just not come into breeding condition. Sometimes this is a sign of ornithosis. So you're going to treat with doxycycline. Salmonella. When you have salmonella, you're going to see this in the younger birds, the chicks and the eggs. You're going to have sick youngsters, sick juveniles, dead and shell eggs, a wet nest. The parents may be thirsty, and the parents may have yellow droppings. That's going to be your clue. So treat with furazolidone or spectamycin. Also, I wanted to be sure and tell you, anytime you treat with antibiotics, please also give a probiotic, because the antibiotics are wiping out all of the good bacteria as well as the bad stuff in the intestine. I personally do not give my birds yogurt because birds are lactose intolerant, and so am I. I don't give them yogurt. I give them Aviculture 2, and you can Google this, Aviculture 2. It's a really good probiotic. It's a live strain. It's viable. It lists the things that we want listed on the bottle. It tells the shelf life. It tells the number of organisms per unit. I have another one too. AVBIOS is the other one. Guaranteed 2 billion CFU per gram. And it's lactic acid. There you go. Lactic acid bacteria. And it's a good probiotic to have on hand. So give that while and after you're treating with antibiotics. Virus, viri. The plural of virus is viri. And they are everywhere. If you have birds outdoors, or you've put your birds outdoors a little bit, they're going to get exposed to viruses even from the outdoor birds. So It's in the air. It's everywhere. One called pox is more common, I think, in canaries than in our Gouldians, but it is brought in usually by mites and mosquitoes. You will see lesions on the body and you'll see crusty eyes. You don't treat viruses with antibiotics, but you would give an antibiotic if you saw these lesions because of the potential for a secondary infection. Paramoxyvirus is a mean one. You will see tremors, paralysis, yellow droppings, probably some conjunctivitis in the eye. Cytomegalovirus is about a 70% death rate. It's not a big one in the United States, although I know of humans who've had it. So anyway, probably not real common in your Gouldians. Serco. If you have nestlings dying and you see black spots on their abdomens, you've got Serco. Stop breeding and clean the aviary, and be aware that you could have carrier birds of this. So spend some time separating, sorting, cleaning. Maybe check your breeding program and just breed a few pairs until you can narrow down to who the carrier bird is. Also, I wanted to mention, I'm not talking about diet or supplements too much today, but we almost have to in order to touch on all the different things. When your birds are molting, make sure they have calcium and vitamins and plenty of sunlight. And baths. Do you spray your birds when they're molting? Spraying them will encourage them to preen, and so then they will molt out better. So I always say, would you like a bath? And then I squirt the bottle, and they have learned to turn around and give me their back for me to spray them. Twirling. Twirling is a neurological problem. Their head seems twisted and they'll spin. They may not be able to perch. There are many theories as to where twirling came from. It might be viral. It might be genetic. It might be a damaged eardrum. It could be a vitamin deficiency. And speaking of vitamin deficiencies, there is another one called stargazing that a lot of times the stargazers, people say it's a neurological problem, but tests have been done, and vitamin B1 is like a wonder drug for stargazing. So if you have a stargazer, move him out and overdose him with your vitamin B1 and see if he doesn't improve. Heat. Sometimes our birds are just hot. If they're panting or holding their wings out, they're way too hot and they can't sweat like we do. So grab your spray bottle and mist them or move them. Or sometimes, mine are outdoors, so sometimes I'll mist them and put a fan on them. Cuts or scrapes. I have a lot of books on Gouldian finches, and it's really interesting to me that no one discusses cuts and scrapes because they do happen. You want to wash it thoroughly with water or peroxide. When Eric was harmed earlier yesterday, I just put peroxide on a Q-tip and gently wiped away all his blood. Then you use cornstarch to stop the bleeding. You'll want to quarantine them and keep them warm and give them food and water. If they were bleeding heavily, I might do the cornstarch first, but generally I always wash first and then do the blood stop, and then I will wash them again if I need to. Eye injuries or conjunctivitis. It is really hard to tell whether it's an injury or it's pink eye in a bird, but it doesn't matter. You can treat it with room temperature aloe vera juice. Just put a drop on, wash the eye with it maybe 4 or up to 8 times a day. If it's in one eye, it can be a sign of parrot fever. So you could start on an antibiotic cocktail, but most of the times eye injuries are just eye injuries. We don't know how they get them. You could use colloidal silver. You can use a tincture of an herb called eyebright. But that's a little bit astringent, so it'll dry the skin out around their eye. You want to kind of pay attention if you're using that one. Rue, fennel extract. You also want to supplement with things like Thrive, Vitalize, or Hardy Bird while you're treating an eye. What else? Mycoplasma, tremors, ruffled feathers, weight loss, lethargy, a high level of urates, and the conjunctivitis. And if a bird is just drowsy or he seems like he's changed his personality, it's a good idea to use your water cleaner, like your Katie cleaner, or what is my other one? I know there's another water cleaner. Yeah, everything but. Anyway, there are other water cleaners besides, this just happens to be the closest one to me. But anyway, use your water cleaner or use Mega Mix. I'll show you that one. I really like Mega Mix for a lot of things. And it helps clean out their crop if they've got a slow crop or something. So consider using Mega Mix or a water cleaner as soon as you see these problems. Now, we need to talk a little bit about parasites. You can keep parasites out of your aviary unless you're outdoors, and then you're going to have continual exposure. Coccidiosis, watery droppings that change to dark green, sudden unexplained deaths, a lot of weight loss. Juveniles wasting away when they're 10 weeks old. If you have more than one do this, consider that it might be coccidiosis. It's a parasite. It's easily transferred. It attacks the liver. So treat with Coxicare, which you can also use as a preventive in damp weather, or I treat again with the 4-in-1. If your birds have mites or lice, you might see itchy bare spots that are not caused from plucking. They may have irritation. They may have damage. They may fluff a lot. They could have pale babies. And if you find a hen dead in the nest and the babies were pale before that, you've probably got mites. Treat with moxidectin. Spray the cage with permethrin before you breed. This would prevent this. Use avian insect liquidator, AIL. Now, that may not kill them all, but it'll bring the numbers down. It does sometimes allow for a secondary infection, so you may want to go ahead and start on some antibiotics. Scaly leg or scaly face. I had some great pictures to show you. I wish I knew how to put them up here. I'll probably do it in a comment down below later. Scaly legs and scaly face are due to mites. They're highly contagious. They can lead to a secondary infection that can cause arthritis in your bird. So they're no laughing matter. When you see these pictures, you will be horrified at what your bird's foot can look like from, or his face from scaly leg. Some people believe that they are low in vitamin A, and that's what lets this set up. So check your vitamin A and treat with either ivermectin or avamectin, scat or S76. I think I have both. Here's scat. Okay. And the S76 I prefer simply because I can put it into the water. Oh yeah, it's the one with the ruined label. Here it is. You can't tell anything from this. Here it is. Okay. So, what other kinds of parasites are there? Well, there's air sac mites. Now, we all know that they cause the clicking noise and the sort of asthmatic sound. You may not know, there's a couple of facts about them that everybody doesn't know. They can live on your perches. They can live in the water. I've heard that a bird had air sac mites and was frozen for a necropsy. And when the scientists began the necropsy and opened the bird up, they were still alive, having been in the freezer for several weeks. So they're persistent. And a lot of people believe that only Gouldian finches get them, but that's not true. I know that owl finches and zebra finches can get air sac mites. And I know that S76 can't get to them at certain stages. So what you have to do is treat on a continual basis. I treat monthly for mine. Coclosma. If you have society finches, which a lot of us use for breeding purposes, it's a flagellate in the digestive tract, coclosma. The nestlings will seem dehydrated. You'll see yellow diarrhea. Treat with ranitazole. Treat with Ronavitis for 10 days. Okay, you might want to do that just when you bring in society finches. And worms are pretty easy to treat for. In general, you can use your worm away. Here's some. Oh, here's worm out gel. And here's your worm away. Oh, there's the water cleaner I was looking for, Ava Cleanse. So anyway, worm out or worm away. I like worm away. Fungal diseases. Fungi are usually going to be things like Candida. When you've wiped out their good bacteria with an antibiotic and you haven't given a probiotic, you may see a flare of Candida. They'll vomit. They'll have weight loss. They'll have a slow crop. Slow crop, Candida. Give a probiotic and treat with nystatin. Aspergillosis. I really thought my parrot here would be on my shoulder during today's talk. He decided to take a nap instead. He is more of a candidate for Asper than most of our finches. But if you're providing a musty or moldy environment, like you're giving them hay for bedding and it's very dusty, or they have a lot of mold around, or they've been exposed to some moldy food, you're going to see respiratory problems. You may think you have air sac mites. There's going to be weight loss. Sometimes you're going to see them stretch their neck and sort of gag. That's your clue that it's Asper. An antifungal may work on this. I don't think there's a real good cure. Just keeping down the dust. One way to keep down the dust, especially when you're removing your bedding, is to spray down the bedding at the bottom of the cage with water before you start rolling it up or rolling it out or whatever you're doing. That will keep the dust from rising to where your birds are breathing it, because we can't tell them to hold their breath. Balding. If they're balding on their head, suspect an iodine deficiency and just give them iodine. You ought to have it on hand and dose it. There's a couple of different kinds. Here's Ioford, and here is another liquid iodine. This one is by, I can't tell who it's by. Morningbird. Yeah, Morningbird. So a couple of different iodines that you can use. It's very easy. Put the drops into the water. We'll talk about that when we talk about diet and supplements. If you can give them kelp also instead of the iodine if you prefer to go the all-natural way. If they're balding all over, they have bare spots, and you know it's not mites, they may just need sunshine. Setting them by a window won't work because the glass is going to keep out the part of the sunshine that you want on your bird. So go ahead and open the window up or set them outside for a while. Egg binding. I think all of us have experienced this at some point or another. With egg binding, you want to have a warm and humid brooder. Now, humidity here today is 52%. I live in a really humid place, but most people don't. If you have a brooder that has a closed top on it. You can just set a cup of water in there, or mine has little trays that hold water that heat up, and so that makes the humidity. And put oil on her vent and see if that doesn't solve the egg binding problem. If they're low in calcium, you know, a bird has to turn over her calcium plasma, her calcium count, 9 times an hour or something like that when she is producing eggs. So your veterinarian can actually give shots of calcium to your birds. In order to have the calcium be effective, though, they need phosphorus and magnesium along with it. Here is some Cal Dissolve. It's calcium and magnesium supplement. You just put it into their water. You can also be sure that you feed them dark leafy green vegetables, broccoli, tofu. Herb salad has dandelion and oat straw, which are both helpful to give calcium. Marshmallow root also, or eggshell, oyster shell, cuttlefish bone, and a mineral block. So that is all of the illnesses I wanted to cover. And I hate that I can't see your questions. I will find them and try to answer them. I know they're there somewhere. I'm sorry. Here is my preventive care routine. Number 1 is keep it clean. Monthly, I treat with scat or S76. I prefer S76 because it also treats scaly face, worms, and coats the throat and stomach. Quarterly, I treat with worm away. Weekly, I do KD cleaner in their water and in their bath water. And I do 2 days of vitamins. You want a sugar-free vitamin. I have 2. If you're wondering why I have 2 of everything, I like to change it up. I feel really strongly, you know, even for us, I feel like we sort of eat the same things all the time and drink the same things, and it would be really good if we would, you know, vary our diet. So I do that with my birds. I'm trying to think. Yeah, Turbo Booster is one, and ABV Vita Gold is the other one. I alternate between them. Put it 2 days a week in your bird's water and in their bath. I always put everything in their bath. Make sure you have sugar-free, because sugary vitamins are going to immediately set up to grow some sort of nasty stuff in their water, and you don't want that. Monthly, spray your cage with permethrin if you're outdoors, or use Control, which is all natural and will even treat mosquitoes. If you want to totally go all natural and keep out mosquitoes and things like that, you can hang mosquito traps, moth traps, fruit fly traps, and you can use diatomaceous earth on the bottom of the cage and around the cage, and that'll pretty much take care of any insects that you want to keep away. Oh, when I was planning this talk, I found a spray cocktail for eye problems. You mix Tylan injectable, Gentosin injectable, Flucort, and Avatron, which is vitamins, in a quart of water, and spray that all over the bird and wet it thoroughly several times a day. And I do have a recipe for that cocktail if you want it, but I also found Betaracin BF. It was from Pet Supplies for Less, and it says it's antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral, antispores. So I think that it might do the trick. I would add it to water, though. I would not spray it on like they suggest, because our finches are really small, and we don't want to cause, you know, problems. Let me just, oh, okay. I started a list for you. I will put it in the forum of Finch Pacific, suppliers of Finch Pacific food and supplements, and labs in the US and Australia that will do testing, and some other things about the medicines and where to get them and what to use. I hope you have found this a little bit helpful. When I was starting out And especially when I was trying to look up illnesses, I felt like it was all a big swirl in my head. Like everything seemed to have the same symptoms. And it took a really long time to start getting it all figured out. So that's why I divided it up by bacterial and parasitic and all of those categories. And then I tried to give you what would help you to determine what you've got. Number one is keep everything clean and get clean births from a good, safe, reliable source. I sure do appreciate you hanging out here with me today. And again, if you want a copy of my ebook when it becomes available, email me at nancyfinchley@gmail.com. Thanks very much and have a great day.